Welcome to the iGamingCare podcast. Safer gambling, smarter choices. Weekly expert-led podcasts from iGamingCare.
Hi, Floris. Welcome to our podcast. It's an honor to have you. For our listeners, we talked last week when we prepared for joining an expert panel at SBC in Lisbon. And now I'm very glad that we can talk one-on-one. But before we start, tell us something about you. I learned that you are Dutch, but you live in Spain, so I'm jealous before we start.
Yeah, perfect. Well, first of all, the honor is all mine and the pleasure is all mine. Pleasure to finally get to get properly introduced. Connected on LinkedIn for a while, but we never had a proper conversation. Yes, SBC was the first opportunity, and then this invite to be on your show, which I gladly accept. Yes, true. I'm Dutch. I do live in Spain. I lived in it's the 8th country that I live. So I'm a bit of a nomad, and I live in the part of Spain that people generally are unfamiliar with. It's on the north coast, so people think Spain warm and hot and maybe a bit dusty, like Andalusia. But no, I live on the green part, the green coast, La Costa Verde. So it's on the north side. It's in Asturias, and I'm stuck between a beautiful coastline and beautiful mountains, the Picos de Europa. And I have view on mountains, cows, and sometimes I see some wild boar and some deer from my kitchen window. So yes, I'm very privileged. I live in a very beautiful spot in the world.
Congratulations to you. So I live in Germany, in Marburg, but today is a good day. I also see clear blue sky and some sunshine, so that's good. And we will meet at a conference in the gambling industry. And this industry has a reputation, rightly said. And
Absolutely.
I wonder, how did you end up there? What brought you to this industry?
Yeah, that wasn't never really a conscious choice. After having lived in Spain, I met my wife here. Then we traveled a bit. We went to Australia, and then after 7 months Australia, we wanted to go back to Europe. And so we exchanged the biggest island nation for one of the smallest island nations, and we ended up in Malta, gamble capital of Europe. And the first 3 years, I did many different things, hospitality, and I was warehouse manager, and I was self-employed. I did a lot of things. I love building and working with recycled materials. So I did kitchen refurbishments, and I built furniture, and I did many different things, all fun. But then at some point, my partner and I decided to have a child. And while she was pregnant, the job I had, I was made redundant. So I quickly needed another job. And then there was the opportunity to take on a link building job in gambling. And I had no idea what link building or SEO was. Neither any affinity with gambling. But it looked interesting. So the salary was good. So I thought, okay, let's do it. Can always change if I don't like it. And I did like it. I became a manager within a month, and schooled myself about SEO, and for the first time in my life, started a bit of a career. That was in end 2016. Mainly, I worked in the affiliate space, mainly Netherlands, also other markets, also a bit of operators. But eventually, in 2020, I moved back to Spain in 2018, and I was working for myself. And I started wondering myself, like, okay, what's this whole gambling industry about, and where's my moral compass? And this is how I started to combine it all with ethics and sustainability and corporate social responsibility.
So there we have something very much in common. So I also work.
Tell me.
I also work for an affiliate. When I look into this industry, I always have the feeling I'm still a newcomer. I have been working in the affiliate business for 5 years by now. And in parallel, as we have discussed earlier, I'm an academic. So I'm a professor, and among other things, I teach ethics. I think we face the same contradiction. People raise an eyebrow and say, when you work in this industry, what is this connection to ethics? Is it a means to even sell more, or is it a fig leaf to pretend you are the good guys And I always enjoy this discussion. I'm always surprised that people are surprised that after they got to know you for an hour or two, you still have not committed a crime, that you are a totally normal person. And from your smile, I can imagine you have similar experiences from time to time.
Absolutely. Well, it was in 2020 that a high school friend called me out on LinkedIn and said, like, what are you doing in gambling? And that's the source of evil and you're ruining lives. And then I really started, I mean, obviously I thought about it before, but then I really started also to write it down and give it a place for myself. And a couple of things that I always come up early in the conversation that you're also familiar with, like, okay, how do these things combine? First of all, gambling is very natural. Life is, in one sense, a type of gambling. There's always uncertainty, and certain cultures are more risk avoidance than others. And some characters, some personalities really thrive by risk. I just recently was writing in the article that I'm working on today. There was this, now I forgot his name, an American, or no, he's not American, Croatian, I think, a free climber. But he climbed without ropes, so solos, the El Capitan, which is like a 1,000-meter vertical cliff.
Yes.
So those people also gamble,
I've
but then
been
that's
there
not being
and
associated
look
with, yeah. So gambling is something very natural to humans.
Mhm.
And gambling is not inherently bad. It's the relationship that you have with it. So yeah, those two things, I think it's, like I said, gambling is not inherently bad. So there will always be a demand. So there will be a supply. And in that sense, I'm very Dutch, very liberal. If there will be a demand, there will be the supply. So better regulate it, so we can try to avoid the worst harm and
Yeah, I think
see
we
if
are
things can.
in our thinking, we are on the same page. So I completely agree. Gambling is human, and even the Romans had Homo Ludens, so the playing man, and that's how you learn. That's how you entertain yourself. And as one motive, I always see a certain escapism, so that you need to free your mind, that you want to get away from something, that you want to relax a little bit. And when I talk to behavioral scientists, you always see people need something to steam off sometimes, to have a distraction. And if it's not gambling, it might be something else.
Oh,
And what can it be? It is maybe more cigarettes, it's more alcohol, or bad things, really bad things. So I'm always a bit skeptic when it comes to regulation. If the idea is you want to stop people from gambling, I would say that's merely impossible, because it's the nature of people. Regulating it to avoid harm, yes, I think that would work, but it's tricky because
absolutely.
you also have this appeal of the forbidden fruit. So when things are illegal, that's probably why Germans drive to the Netherlands to buy cookies in a shop. It's attractive. And especially for groups that are young players, the 18-year-old kids that can play for the first time, they want to try it out. It's like driving a car. They want to go to the limits and do it. So I think it's super challenging to find a good balance for protecting people. And from an ethical point of view, there's also this general question, who has the right to limit someone else in what that person is allowed to do? And when I look at parallels in the country I live in, I would be very limited to put a deposit for betting, but I'm not limited at all, if I have the money, to put it on the stock exchange or buy crypto and lose it all. So I think there's a lot of ambiguity in this discussion.
Absolutely. And to elaborate on what you said, so the right of free choice to decide what you spend your money and your free time on. I think everything has a place in life. I'm a very spiritual person. I've spent a lot of time on researching philosophy and the religions and what is life, what it means to be human, why are we here? And my main conclusion is here we are here to experience. And I think that also the merit goods, the device products, drugs, alcohol, or what have you, are there to experience and see what it does to you. And then those people that have had the privilege or the fortune to grow up in a healthy environment with loving parents, have friends who don't have a lot of stress, financial stress or whatever. Those people, they found out what it does. Some people have a good experience, some people have a bad experience, and they process it and they learn from it and they move on in life. Now, who are the ones that develop problem gambling are generally the ones that don't have that privilege. They had either they're traumatized from upbringing, maybe abuse, maybe there was a lot of stress in the house. Like there is so much stress now for people with people doing jobs they don't like. They come home, they maybe have children, you maybe have a difficult relationship, or maybe you're a single parent. And then you grow up as a child not having the safe, warm environment that you're supposed to have, that you're entitled to have to develop personally and emotionally. And then all of a sudden you're being exposed to something that triggers the dopamine in the brain. And you get this rush that feels good. And whether this rush is induced by gambling or by drugs or by ecstatic dancing or by extreme sports or by sex or porn or what have you. If you're not in a stable environment, then it's very easy to get hooked to your own biological system. And this is something that we need to facilitate for people to deal with, to learn to live with, and to find out what it does to themselves. So that's what I mean. I think gambling has a place in life and in society. And in extreme cases, what we see with certain parties. Again, I'm mostly familiar with the Dutch market, where there are a couple of political parties that are very extreme on banning it, and they want to revert the whole legalizing, regulating of gambling. But then I think, what do you think to achieve with it? The only thing that you will achieve is that players will go to the black market. They want to gamble, they will gamble. It's nothing. Exclusion is not a solution.
There, I also agree. When I look at examples like the Dutch regulation or the German regulation, you see that so many people play where gambling is not regulated at all. And in Germany, you can even measure it because we have an explicit tax for online slots. So you see the numbers, and they, over the last 3 years, they dropped by 70%. And yes, you could argue maybe the stakes were lower, maybe fewer people played, but it's kind of obvious that quite a number of people went where they can do what they want without limitations. And for me, it's always interesting to see if you want to control problem gambling. The question is, where do you attack? And the one way that regulators do, you do it at the end. You say you reduce the limits and so on. But if you look at the root cause, you can look at psychology. Who is the most endangered group that falls into problem gambling? It's young men, single young men, uneducated young men, low-income young men. So it's people who are already in a problematic situation. And yes, if they fall to gambling, that might get even worse. But it's really difficult to say if gambling causes harm or if problems cause you to gamble. So I don't have a black and white answer, but in my opinion, it's super important that all the stakeholders work together. People like you and me who are in the industry with a certain distance and reflection, the regulators, the players themselves, families and others. So I think just trying to fix it by the book of law is a high hope, but very often it will not work. I don't know many examples where really changed the situation dramatically in a country in terms of gambling harm by introducing regulation. But you live in Spain. I think Spain is the country where gambling is pretty much accepted as entertainment. So you you put some money on the table, like you buy a movie ticket or go for dinner. And when the money is spent, since you lose anyhow, you had 2-3 hours of entertainment, but you accept that you lose. And I would say addiction starts when you chase losses, when you always need a higher thrill, a higher frequency. So it's also a matter how gambling is perceived by society. So if you're made an outlaw, that's very different to, oh, you're just looking for entertainment.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. I mean, I've studied intercultural communication. I've looked a lot into what makes cultures different, and the acceptance. I've noticed it personally when I speak to parents of my daughter's classmates and or friends, and sometimes you get the question what you do, and when I'm mentioning gambling, here I was surprised by how comfortable people are with. Like, oh, okay. While in the Netherlands or in other environments where I've mentioned that would be like, oh, you work in gambling. It was immediately perceived differently. So yeah, cultures. Also, for example, in the UK or in Australia, where I've spent a couple of months there, it's really a part of the culture, and it's much more socially accepted than in certain other countries. And it's funny because what you just mentioned with regulation was one of the topics that I'd suggested for today, perverse
Yeah.
incentives. So
Yeah.
you try to regulate something and then you have unforeseen consequences. And one of the things that I think most regulators, or maybe not the regulators, but specifically the politicians that are involved in whether laws get accepted, it must be because of ignorance in the positive sense of the word, that it just means the absence of knowledge, of experience in a certain topic, that they are unaware of what certain kinds of regulation, what effect it will have. If you want to protect the player and you make deposit limits or reduce spins or these kind of things, people want that experience. I mean, you had a great example the other day. I think you also used it in the conversation with Steven Frolik. If you have a restaurant, if you want less
Yeah.
people to come or not order, you cannot you make not nice food and hope that they will consume. They will go to a different restaurant. I thought I don't exactly get how you said it, but it was a brilliant example. That's exactly the case. And especially with globalization and online, there are no really borders. It's very hard to set jurisdictions. So the consumer will find what they want anyway.
Yeah. So for me, when I read your suggestion, perverse incentives, this made me think of a historical anecdote. So it was in the good old days in colonial India, where the British wanted to reduce the number of cobras, of the snakes. So they
Yes, very
decided
famous example. Yes.
they pay everyone money to bring a dead cobra. So what do smart people do? They start breeding cobras, and they brought tons of cobras. Then the lawmaker, the British, found out that was not a good idea. So they then said, we stop it. We don't pay for it. So what was the next effect? Hundreds of
They just let
thousands
the
of
cobras go.
cobras that were breeded for being given to the British, they were released. So that was the biggest plague of snakes India has ever seen. And to me, this is an example that whatever you do, when human beings are involved, you must not be too rigorous. You must use fingertip feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think you must understand how people think. So yes, not everyone is the good, perfect, shiny guy. And most of us, we make the best out of every situation. And if it's breeding cobra, then we will do it. And it's
Self-interest.
for me. So when I talk in images, this is the player who is running against the wall. So when you are at risk to be a gambling addict, what happens to your mind? You need a higher thrill. So that means you have to play faster and you have to increase the stakes. So, and your wall is the monthly deposit limit. So what do you do if you have spent it all and cannot legally continue? So maybe some bounce back and wait 2 weeks until they can do the next deposit. but hundreds of thousands of people will jump over the wall, go where there is no protection, go where there's no tax for the government, and continue playing. And I think by making the obstacle too high, you cannot stop people. They will find a way. And it's an interesting discussion. In Germany, for example, you still argue what is the percentage of the black market. So some people say it doesn't exist. Others say it's 70%. And you have everything in between. So if you would base decisions in business on everything or nothing, you can throw a dice. Trust your gut feeling. And that to me is also a challenge that you do not have enough data to really base regulatory decisions on.
Yeah.
All the problems, but we don't really have a solution, do we?
Well, that's most people. We always, so many people look for silver bullets. They don't exist. There are never simple solutions. We always come up with solutions. It's human brains. We model reality, but there's an infinite amount of variables. So you can never have perfect solutions. You can never have solutions that are applicable everywhere. Everything is local and cultural. And I mean, there are two directions we can have this conversation going. I'm already at a bit of a split. First, before we move back into the ethics, because that's like, so what's the solution? I have some ideas about that. But first, I want to give a couple of more of the perverse incentives examples. For example, the self-exclusion. So, okay, player, we now detect, we use AI, operators use AI to see, okay, this person has a risk. To say, like, okay, no, this person has a risk. We talk to them and like, okay, you know what, conclusion, we have to exclude you.
Yes.
Or a player could have a lucid moment themselves and say that, okay, I'm going to exclude myself. I should stop this. Perfect. Okay, we provide the tools. And then in some countries like the Netherlands, there is a universal national exclusion list. So they cannot play with any regulated. The moment that this person has a weak moment, wants to play again, he cannot play at the place where they're being protected and when their behavior is being monitored. They automatically go. And then another perverse incentive. So then there's money being made. So what does the affiliate do? No Crux Casino, no GameStop Casino, you immediately create a funnel that people think like, oh, there's money to be made. Let's dive into it. Then you can also say like, okay, we're going to set certain rules. And if operators or companies don't comply with them, we're going to fine them. Perverse incentive. There is money to be made. So they're going to calculate these fines. They say like, okay, but that's a risk. Some people will say we won't do it because of ethical, moral, whatever reasons, or business risk reasons. We calculate that because of that, there is an X% of the market that we can get if we do it, and then we just calculate it. There's so many loopholes constantly in the rules, and that's the incentive that our economic system incentivizes. It's okay to make money, so we find the loopholes. Nobody acts in the spirit of the law. Everybody is just looking for loopholes to exploit human psychology for private gain. And this is where I think the root of the problem is. And then people, this is where conversations that I've had often end or become very heated, because this is where they start calling me socialist or communist or Marxist or whatever. Because you're like, oh, you're against profit. I don't know. I'm not against profit. I'm not against exclusion. I'm not against anything. I'm not against any object. The object is never in itself inherently bad. It's the relationship you have with it. And this is the conversation that I'm trying to steer to people, business people with. Like, okay, so how do you solve it? And I think solving it is about balance and about setting limits. But no, the rules of the games is that we can make that profit and GDP always need to grow. So we should not set limits on salary or on profits for shareholders. Yeah, but if you don't set limits, then you never can find balance. Then it will always become excessive. And that's the irony of the whole thing. We constantly talk about players being able to be protected because they're addicted to gambling. Yeah, but who's going to protect them from the business people that are addicted to profit and power and money?
Yeah, as long as we have capitalism, the name of the game is business. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, but I don't agree, because there are many different types of capitalism. There are many smart, and that's a lot of books that I've been reading over the last couple of years.
But I would still say you still have people with a sense of morale, with common sense, and the I would say the reputation also of entrepreneurs and managers is sometimes worse than reality. You always feel, it's so rough, they maximize profit, that's all they do, they sacrifice the world for it. But in the end, most of them are family fathers or mothers, they raise children, they have their home, they don't want to risk to step outside of the law because they have a lot to lose. And I still think they have a moral compass. Most people
I completely agree, but there are a lot of jurisdictions where we don't have these laws, and they're still operating legally, while
yes,
somebody with an operator with the Curaçao or San Juan or whatever license, from their perspective, from where they're sitting, they're not doing anything illegal at the moment.
exactly.
Unless they go into an unregulated market and start targeting those players.
That's perfectly legal. And you even have governments who act the same way. So I think when we both smile, we think of Malta. So that do not enforce European regulation with this famous Bill 55 that now has another number. But basically,
Oh, does it?
You can do whatever you want as long as you're on our lovely island. Nobody can sue you, or at least even if they win, they cannot enforce it. And there, in my opinion, if you cannot harmonize that, even within the European Union, you see that the legislation cannot hold pace with the internet and the borderless world. So you gave the example of gamblers that come to their limit or that are self-excluded, and then they have a bad moment and say, I want to continue. Yeah, maybe they are blocked in the Netherlands or in Germany. But if they know how to use VPN, in the blink of an eye, they can play anywhere in the world. And to me, that is also a challenge for regulators. You regulate and protect those that are already playing in this protected cosmos. And all the others who really want to spend big and need the thrill, they escape. So they are never ever in this protected area. So you end up in refining the rules for maybe only a minority, while the big boys spend their money outside of the regulated world with those operators that you mentioned that sit on a Caribbean island or anywhere where whatever they offer is legal. And depending on the jurisdiction, the individual that plays overseas commits a crime in its own country. So super weird situation, in my opinion.
Yeah. So is there a solution? And is there ever hope for an ethical gambling industry? What do you think?
I think there is hope, but you will only cover a portion of the industry. When you
Sorry, there was a stutter in the line. I didn't hear what you said.
Yeah, so you will only protect and or you only have a certain amount of people and a certain portion of the market in this orderly manner. You will always have people who don't care, who maximize their profit and maybe shrug the shoulders if an individual is ruined because everything was lost. So I believe as long as you provide a legal environment with limits, then at least you have a playground where you can reasonably play safely. But it requires the player to make a conscious decision to stay in this world. I do not believe that you can protect those who don't want to be protected. Impossible. Not in the borderless world of the internet.
But I do think that there are still plenty of tools in the toolbox that are being unused. For example, from the crypto side, it's difficult because crypto is still far unregulated.
Yes.
Or not regulated enough. But still, most consumers are uncomfortable with using crypto, and they rely on their credit, debit card, their PayPal, their Trusty, whatever you have. There are too many casinos, or most casinos, are just being facilitated by those providers. I would say, as a regulator, if you deal with providers, or if you want a provider, all providers should be licensed, or whether you're software or a payment provider. You cannot get licensed if you deal with companies or businesses that we can show operate illegally in our market. So then players, consumers are not able to make payments or are not able to play, I don't know, play and go, pragmatic play, whatever those kind of games, because they won't be able to get a local license. So this is something that I still wonder, like, is it, and I'm not, this would be interesting to get Steven involved because he's a lawyer. I mean, he's much more knowledge about these things. But is that so hard should that be so hard to realize, to restrict those things?
I think that's possible. So when I look into Scandinavian countries, they do IP blocking. Yes, you can try to overcome it.
It's a cat and mouse, you know. They have abc.com, abc1.com, abc2.com, you know, it will constantly.
Correct. But at least they force payment providers not to cooperate with the bad guys.
Yeah.
And I think that's a sharp sword that works. And another example that is not coming from the legislator is one that I like, that a very big operator decided on a program called Trusted Partners, where, for example...
Yes, who was it? Merkur or no?
It's not Merkur, it's another one.
One of the German ones. Anyway.
But that means they say if you offer your slots and games to an unlicensed operator, we do not work with you anymore.
Yeah, perfect.
And that to me is a strong handle, because as long as there's enough business in the legal market, it's a super strong incentive for game providers to say I have to stick to them. And that means the licensed operators have an advantage in their product offering. And that to me shows that you are also, from the affiliate side, as long as we act legally, we must fight the illegal operators. So that means we are an ally of the regulators. We are not their enemy. But when you look at it, you're sometimes not so clear where the front line is, at least as a matter of perception.
Yeah, I agree. It's a fascinating topic, although we're moving away from the ethics of it.
Yeah.
Another thing that I always think of is that why are the Curacao, the Panama, the Antoine, those licenses able to operate? Is because there are markets that are not locally regulated. So that would be the next. That would also be the next step. There should be a strong lobby or from other regulated countries for unregulated countries to regulate. But that would be another thing that. But then to the ethics of it, ethics and profit maximization is just very hard to combine, because, you know, especially when you have shareholders who demand profit, then they say, like, yeah, it's fun that you have morality, but I want a return of investment. So if you don't deliver on your return of investment, I pull my money and go somewhere else.
Yes. So what you describe as Milton Friedman, the business of business is business. And it's a fascinating question. So we frequently discuss that in our ethics classes. So is it the responsibility of businesses to be ethical, or is it the responsibility of society with its system of laws and enforcement to set boundaries and enforce rules? So I personally think you need a moral compass when you are in business. However, it's a matter of society and the elected government to set the boundaries and the rules. So if I give an example where I feel the line is not clear, this is when it comes to our affiliate business. And if we do improper advertising in my country, who is in trouble? The company we advertise for. So if my company advertises for a legal operator and mixes our advertising with some illegal operators, they can lose their license. And that, in my opinion, is on the edge, because I think law enforcement is a matter of the law enforcers. So this is also when I get a speeding ticket, I want to get it from the police, not from my neighbor who's in a bad mood. So I think we have to be very careful not to overload business with the obligation to be super moralistic. So the bad guys you will never catch, and I still believe 90% of businessmen are good people. But for the others, it's a government job. It's not the industry, because you are responsible for yourself, but you cannot enforce any rules with your competitors. You can't.
90% of business people are good people. I tend to agree if we take it on average globally on all industries.
Yes.
But that
Do
said,
you
we
think
are in an
in our
industry
industry it's the
together with
opposite?
crypto and gambling. It does attract a certain kind of people that
Yes.
I think the percentages are a bit shifted
Mhm.
in our industry. But I've spent quite some time on Milton's famous, infamous article from, what was it, the
Mhm.
70s? There's no such thing
Yeah,
as corporate social responsibility.
it's
The
a real
business of
classic.
business is doing business. And so what I did, there was a very nice exercise. I prompted ChatGPT to act, to represent, talk as Milton Friedman, and
Mhm.
had a discussion with it regarding its corporate social responsibility. The trigger was that I read an article, the environmentalists or scientists debunking neoclassical economics. Consumer is rational. No, they're not. They have absolute knowledge. No, they're not. The world has infinite capacity to deal with waste. No, they're not. It doesn't. And so there's a whole list. So I prompted this into my Milton Friedman ChatGPT and said, like, okay, so what's the case for corporate social responsibility and where does the line? And then, yes, in a perfect world where the regulator has all the means to set fair rules and to act in the interest of society and set boundaries and protect, and would have the knowledge about global tipping points. And then, as we know, with the atmosphere and acidification and all those difficult things that we're pretty much already screwed up, most of them, then yes, in a perfect world, I completely agree with Milton. But unfortunately, we live in a world where corporations have become so rich and so powerful that the lobby and politics is also being so corrupted and influenced by money, that the system that Milton says would work in is pure theoretical. At least it was
Yes.
by conclusion. It doesn't work in practice because there's so many other variables that, yes, in a perfect situation, in perfect world, that would work. But it doesn't. So we have to set boundaries somewhere. And to come back to ethics, and this is where I think that we live in very interesting times. This is also what my idea was with Better World Casinos. Now with the availability of information and how easy it to share it through the digital means of internet, and the consumer becoming more and more aware and better educated, that they can start demanding transparency, and we can, through investigative journalism, deliver transparency. We can hold the business, the industry to the light, and then give the consumer a choice. You can play at all these operators, all these gambling brands, and you have more or less the same games, the same payment methods, the same payout speed, the same odds, the same bonus. Your user experience and value for money is the same. But company A is seriously about responsible gambling and protecting its consumer and giving fair wages to its employees, and maybe has more than decent salary ratios. Salary ratios are insane in this industry.
Mhm.
It ranges. There are companies that pay a ratio 1 to 2,000. That means that the lowest get 1,000, and then the other ones get 10 or 100 million a year. That's insane. And then bring that back to ethics. How can you justify those kind of remunerations? So there are companies that are serious about ESG. And ESG is not about how to become sustainable. No, it's how to measure sustainability. How well are you balanced on environment and social and governance? And there are companies that just don't care. And this is my hypothesis, is that if you are able to educate and brings this information to the consumer, then especially Gen Z, who are much more in touch with values and their local community and friends and peers that recommend or that they are being felt that they're being judged on. And they gamble. Like, no, I gamble with this company because they try to be ethical, and those who don't. And if I can prove this hypothesis to be true, that this would work, then you can get operators to pay attention, because then you can connect their brand values to the consumer values. And this is the poll that I'm currently doing on LinkedIn. What's the most important threat or the biggest challenge? And so far, the biggest challenge, according to the people who voted, and there were 20-something votes, is reputation. Reputation remains one of the biggest things. So if we can link these things up and then say to the operator, look, the consumer cares, then maybe we can bring ethics back into gambling and advertising.
I completely understand the idea. I would love to believe in it, but I'm skeptic.
Good.
Even with Gen Z. And give you an example from another industry. We have done some research. I had some bachelor thesis, and the students looked into the question, are you willing to make the reputation or ESG of a company a criteria for your purchasing decision? And they had a simple question and said, let's say you buy your T-shirts and jeans, and you know that this T-shirt is made in a factory where no underage people work, where they pay decent salaries, etc., etc., etc. Or the other one that is made extremely cheap and people suffer. And the price difference for you is only 10%. And then they did, if you raise your hand, everyone says, yeah, I would pay a little more and I would take the good guys. But when you do the same survey anonymously, you find out that almost everyone buys the cheap stuff. And
attitude doesn't determine behavior.
Yes, it doesn't change the behavior. And in gambling, I see an additional difficulty because it's so easy to jump across the border between legal and illegal, and you have benefits. So just look at the tax. So if you have tax for the operators, if you have tax per round you play, the chances that you win are better when there's no tax, because
can have higher RTPs.
They can have higher RTPs. So that means, assuming you understand the logic of RTPs, the rational decision is to play with the illegal ones as long as you don't get caught. So I think it takes a lot of attitude to say, yes, I know that, but I still play with the ones that are taxed, that are legal. It's like crossing a street with a red light. So maybe we don't care that much unless there are children around and we give a bad example. And I think this is not only the ethics of the business and the companies, it's first and foremost the ethics of the individuals. So if every individual would play ethical, we would have no black market.
So two responses to that. First, the example of the T-shirt. And that's why I think the gambling industry is such an interesting case to test my hypothesis on, because there is practically no, the value for money remains the same. They have still the same experience. And assuming people want to gamble for entertainment, yes, RTP can be 1% or 2 or 3 higher or lower. But we both know that statistically the player wouldn't notice this difference, because RTP is calculated over millions of spins.
Yes.
Volatility is a much more important gaming mechanism than RTP is. Whereas the T-shirt example, the T-shirt that is made sustainable and ethically is more expensive. And the other point was that I was going to make. So that, and this is the difficult. So we were talking about earlier. Okay, what needs to be done in order for the industry to climb up and to become more ethical? And one of the things that, like, all markets need to be regulated. So yes, all pillars need to rise at the same speed, as soon as all hypothetically all markets would be regulated, then there would not be a way for a player just to jump over the fence and go play somewhere else.
Yes.
So a lot of these solutions are, yes, if the situation would be like that, then it could be a way. And that's the interesting it's always and, it's never either or.
Mm-hmm.
We always have to see how many things we can implement and keep pushing and keep lobbying for. But slowly we can push it into the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have, when we discussed the topics we wanted to talk about, you also came with the thought model, if money would not be the driver for all of us, so if we would be beyond capitalism, would we still play?
Yes, that's a question I love to think about.
This really made me think, and I'm always, because I cannot really answer it, I also think of parallels that are pretty close to that situation. So let's say everyone would have a decent income paid from somewhere that you can live on.
Universal basic income.
Would you still go to university and learn? Would you still go to an office and work? Or would you sit at home, watch Netflix all day and eat and drink and sleep? And I'm not sure, but I would assume that some people think they can climb up Maslow's pyramid and say, I am myself and I can fulfill my dreams up there. And others might say, okay, it's warm, dry, and I have food. That's it. So to me, I think people would still gamble, and in order to make it exciting, they would probably try to put a little bit of their unconditional income at stake. So as long as we have that, I would say gamble would exist. But if money has no meaning at all, then that might be different. But I don't know. I'm not socialized in a situation without money. Neither are you. But
No.
I wonder, you have put more thought into it. What is your conclusion so far?
So the topic of universal basic income is very fascinating. We can talk about that for hours. I recommend people to look into the work of Rutger Bregman. He's a historian, journalist, writer. He did a lot of interesting research. There's a lot of research being done about UBI that already goes back to the 40s and 50s of last century.
We might get very close to it. When you see the efficiency gains we have with AI, all these knowledge workers, maybe we only have to work a day in a week and so on, and then we have to have something like that.
Yeah,
but
so I think at some point it will be maybe inevitable, but that's a different topic. So the topic is, will people still gamble if money has lost or has got a different value? So I started with going back to trying to apply a little bit of first principle thinking. What implies gambling? And is risk inherent to gambling? And my conclusion is yes. If there is no risk, then gambling is no fun.
Mm-hmm.
Play a dice that has one on each side and then gamble on whether it's going to be one. You know it's going to be one. Nobody's going to play that game. So, and then, but there need to be a felt risk, a perceived risk. Like you can win something that is substantial, and then so even if money would have a different value, there would still be other things of perceived value to individuals. I don't know, a dinner with your idol, with your famous pop star or something. So there's still things, but gambling, it's not about winning. Gambling is also about the risk. So if you would lose, you would have to lose something. And then what would people gamble? Winning, okay, this is kind of games that we played when we were children. Maybe you recognize it. Okay, then maybe there's some kind of punishment, maybe physical punishment. People like that. Well, there are people into that. Or maybe people get really extreme and I don't know, they start to bet their organs. I don't know. There's always stuff of value that they could say, like, I'm willing to make that bask for that risk if the odds of winning and losing are interesting enough that it gives a thrill. But is gambling only the dopamine or the chemical reaction in the brain? Or is there more to that? And that would be very interesting to talk to, I don't know, to a psychiatrist or psychologist and get involved in. But yeah, this is how far I've came with that thought experiment. I don't know. What do you think?
I would go one step further. I think it's in the people to be competitive. So even if you have nothing to win, people will race and want to find out who is the fastest running 100 meters.
Yes, there will still be betting on sports.
When you have kids, you exercise some sports or you play chess or something, you don't win a prize, but you have this agonistic principle where you say, am I better than the others? So as long as you are in groups, I think there will always be this kind of measuring competition, who is the first. It's a little bit more difficult when you talk about slots, where you're sitting in front of a computer screen and play for yourself. So maybe you measure up, I win more often than yesterday, I don't know. But there it gets difficult. So unless you compare yourself to someone else, I think the motivation would be almost gone. If
I think, but
what
what you mentioned, the gambling product will definitely change. I think in such an environment, slots will become a lot less interesting because exactly you can only win money with it. But for example, sports events still will be going on, and they will always still have the derbies of between team A and B, and you have the fans of A and the fans of B who will always like, oh, and I'm gonna bet you, and maybe that is a bit of a more spiritual conclusion. People would just bet for the honor of it. And this is also the bets that I do with my daughter, when we sit at the dinner table, and I'm sure it's like this. Like, okay, want to bet? And then she says €5. I said, no. We bet for honor. You're either right or wrong, and then you can flatter your ego.
Yeah, but that would be an ideal world if people are content with that. Gambling harm at least would not ruin you financially anymore.
Yeah.
Maybe you end up in the Great Depression, but let's say the financial ruin, that would be gone. I usually try to end these podcast recordings more on the light side. And I have a couple of deep psychological questions. And
I know what's coming. I saw the one with Steven.
Often when it comes to holidays, I know this year we have both been to France, pretty close to each other even. But my overall question is, for holidays, what is it for you? Mountains or the sea?
Mountains.
That's a clear answer.
I can enjoy both, but if I have to choose, I would choose mountains. Yeah.
Okay.
I was born in the Netherlands, it's flatlands.
Yeah, there are no mountains. Yeah. Okay. And food, burgers or sushi?
Oh, I hate to have to choose from food, but I guess it would be sushi.
Okay. And drinks, beer or wine or water?
Lately, then I would choose for water. I don't know if I need to elaborate on that, but I enjoy a good beer. I enjoy a good glass of wine. But I've done last year no alcohol January or no drink, and I felt amazing since afterwards. The body was so clean that afterwards I've practically stopped drinking alcohol, and I feel a lot better physically. Hangovers used to be when I was young, they were 3 hours, and now they're like 3 days. comes with age.
Got it. And the last one is decision making. Numbers or instinct?
Oof, instinct.
Instinct?
It's both. But again, I could elaborate on that a lot more, but let's not. But instinct,
okay.
Yeah.
Floris, that was an insightful, entertaining hour. I enjoyed it very much.
Same here.
I look
Likewise.
forward to continuing it with a glass of water or a glass of wine for me. Portuguese wine. Hope to see you in Lisbon. We will be on the panel and we will find a bit more time to chat. Thank you so much and see you in Portugal soon and hopefully soon again in our podcast. Thanks, Floris.